Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Who would have thought I would get to Sedona from Hong Kong? Wow. I mean, I've been dead and back, but this is a challenge. I used to be afraid of public speaking. And the first time Wayne Dyer pulled me up on stage at one of his I Can Do It events, I stood there in front of 2,500 people, and I was really nervous. This was just a little over a year ago. And he said to me, "How do you feel?" Right there, while I was standing there in front of everybody. I said, "Really nervous." And he said, "You've been dead and back. What do you have to be scared about?" And I think it was in that moment that I realized that I had nothing to fear, at least as far as public speaking goes. So, you know, you can't imagine how happy I am to be here, not just here in Sedona, but to be alive, to be here physically in this life. Because life is really such a gift. And the sad thing is that most people don't value what they have until they lose it. And so my purpose for standing here and sharing my story with you is because I don't want you to only realize the gift that is life at the point in time when you are about to lose it. I want you to know it now. I had an experience, as you all know. I shouldn't be here. I should have died on February the 2nd, 2006. If the doctors were right, I wouldn't be here. On that day, I was in a coma, and I went into a coma because of end-stage cancer. And as many of you know already, at that point in time, my organs were shutting down. I had tumors, some of them the size of lemons, all over my body, starting from the base of my skull, all around my neck, down under my arms, my chest, all the way down to my abdomen. My muscles were completely wasted away. I couldn't walk. I couldn't really lift my arms. I couldn't even lift my head up. My head was like this all the time. And I weighed about 85 pounds. I would either be sitting in a wheelchair or lying in bed. When I would lie down, I would choke on my own fluid because my lungs were filled with fluid. I had to have the fluid from my lungs removed every few days before it would accumulate again. I had these huge open skin lesions where the toxins were coming out of my skin. And when I went into a coma, the doctors told my family that these were my final hours. Unbeknownst to everyone around me, though, my awareness during that time when I was in a coma was actually heightened. I was aware of everything that was going on around me. I was aware of everything the doctors were doing, all the conversations that were taking place. I was aware of my family, my husband standing or sitting by my bedside, and my mother. My mother was praying to Shiva and Ganesha. My husband was just sitting by my bedside holding my hand and watching the dials above my bed, willing for me to come back. But I was also aware of what they were feeling, and I was aware of everything that even the doctors were feeling and the nurses and everybody who was treating me. It was like I shared their same essence, like I could feel, like I shared their consciousness. But not only that, the most amazing thing was that for the first time in my life, I felt this incredible feeling of unconditional love. It was like I was embraced by this feeling of total, unconditional love. It's really hard to describe this feeling because it's much more powerful than any kind of love that I've ever experienced in physical life before. It was truly unconditional in that for the first time in my life, I felt I didn't have to do anything to prove myself or do anything to deserve it. I was loved just because I existed. I felt as though I had always been loved, but had never realized it. In that realm, I realized that I had actually always been loved, but never knew. I also felt as though my consciousness was expanding so that it stretched far greater, much more than the room that my physical body was contained in. I was aware of my body lying there on the hospital bed. But it was as though my consciousness was far bigger than my body, and the body actually looked insignificant to me. And my consciousness continued to expand. And it felt as though time and space was very different in that realm. It was as though I could be anywhere at any time. There was no time lapse, like I could travel any distance and there would be no time lapse. It was as though everything was happening simultaneously. The best way I can describe it is as though I was viewing my life or lives. It was as though I could see what were past lives plus my future, and I could see it all happening simultaneously, as though I was viewing a tapestry. And this is what I mean about it happening all at once. Like when you're viewing a tapestry, you see the entire completed tapestry. There's no time lapse between the time you see this color or this part and that part. I was able to see it all at once. It was as though all my lives were happening simultaneously. Everything was just so clear. And it was like I was one thread woven in that tapestry. I could see where I had been. I could see where I had yet to go. But I could also see there were choices. That if I went this way, this would happen. And if I went this way, this would happen. And there were parts of the tapestry that were still unfinished. I could see all the lives I had already touched and all the lives that I had yet to touch. I became aware of my Father's essence. Now, I just want to add here, though, that in that realm, because time didn't exist in the way it does here, here we perceive in linear time, where we perceive one thought or one moment of time at a time and we string it together to make linear time. It's not like that there. It's like all of time is existing all at once. So in the retelling of my story, I'm telling it in linear time and I have to give it a sequence. But this isn't the exact sequence in which it happened. I encountered the essence of my Father. When I was growing up, my father and I had a very turbulent relationship because my parents are Indian. They tried to bring me up with Hindu cultural values, but I rebelled against them, particularly because I was actually brought up in a multicultural society. I went to school with British children, but the local people where I lived were Chinese. I lived in a Chinese country and went to a British school. So I spoke 3 languages simultaneously. I spoke my parents' language at home, I spoke English at school, and I spoke Chinese with the local people. And when you're exposed or immersed in 3 cultures simultaneously and you speak their language fluently, you're exposed to different cultural values, and many of these values can contradict each other. And so I used to argue with my parents about their cultural values. I mean, to give you a simple example, in the Hindu culture, you absolutely must not eat beef because the cow is revered as a mother figure. Now, all the kids at my school were going to McDonald's and eating hamburgers. So I couldn't understand why I couldn't do what they were doing. So these kinds of things, as a youngster, I would push against my parents. As I got older, it got a little more complicated. My parents wanted me to have an arranged marriage. I didn't. Finally, they arranged a marriage for me, but just before the wedding day, I ran away, which brought a lot of shame and embarrassment to my family, the groom's family, and to our community. I was ostracized from the Indian community, and my parents were told that no Indian man in our community would ever marry me. But of course, I met my wonderful husband. So during my life, I had always felt that I'd let my father down. I'd always felt that I'd disappointed him. I always felt that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't Indian enough. I never met his expectations. I felt as though my entire life he was preparing me to get married. It was like his biggest wish was for me to get married. And finally, just a few months before my wedding day, he passed away. So I was really sad when he passed away, because this was the one thing I wanted him to see, was my wedding. I wanted him to see me happy and married. When I met my father's essence in the other realm, I was ready to feel again the guilt or the judgment. But all I felt from him was pure, unconditional love. And I realized that all he had ever felt for me was unconditional love, although it hadn't seemed that way. I realized that love gets very distorted in this dimension, in this realm. In that realm, I started to understand that when we cross over, not only do we leave behind our physical bodies, our physical biology, our bodies, but with our bodies goes our gender, which we leave behind. We leave behind our race, our culture. We leave behind our ego, our values. All these get left behind. So what crosses over? Our essence, our pure essence, our consciousness. Once you've stripped all these layers and layers of filters away, that essence that is left, that essence is pure, unconditional love. It's just pure before it's been diluted and filtered through all our cultural conditionings and gender conditionings and so on, and ego responses. So in that realm, I encountered my father, and all I felt from him was pure, unconditional love. And I understood that that's all he had ever felt for me. And even when he tried to get me married, he did it out of love, because he believed that the most loving thing he could do was to find me a good husband, because that was his cultural belief. I understood that even though I had always thought I was a victim of my culture, I realized that in a sense, either we are all victims or none of us are victims, because even he is a victim of his culture in the same way I was. He was just bringing me up in the best way he knew how, doing it as lovingly as he knew how to do. This brought me huge understanding of how so many of us are well-meaning, but it doesn't always appear that way when we express through all these various filters we have. I also realized in that realm that even though I was looking for forgiveness from my father, I realized that what I got from him was something far more than forgiveness. It was pure compassion and empathy. And that is far deeper than forgiveness, because when you forgive someone, what you're really saying is that You've hurt me, you've wronged me, but I'm going to forgive you anyway. So it's like you judge the person, that they've done something wrong, but you're going to forgive them. What I felt from him was something far deeper and far beyond that. It was more a feeling of, you didn't do anything wrong, you did everything the best you knew how. And that's all I felt for him and from him. I also encountered the essence of my best friend. She had passed away 2 years before my near-death experience. She also had suffered from cancer. And I had missed her painfully as I was going through the cancer myself. And I had also felt tremendous guilt because during her last few months of life before she died, I had been unable to see her because I couldn't deal with her illness. I couldn't deal with her deteriorating body. Every time I went to see her, it had brought me fear because I was already suffering from cancer. And it made me feel that this is what I had in store for me, because her deterioration was very, very rapid. So I couldn't bear to see her the last few months. So when I got the call from her sister that she had finally passed, I was really devastated. And when I saw her in the other realm, again, all I felt from her was just unconditional love. And it was just the most amazing feeling to connect with her. During this time while I was in the coma, my brother was in India trying to reach Hong Kong. I was in Hong Kong, lying in a hospital bed in Hong Kong. My brother was trying to reach me before I died. I even became aware that he was trying to get on a flight. And I even recall thinking to myself that I have to stay alive. I mustn't die before he gets here. I reached a point where I realized that I had a choice of whether I wanted to come back into my physical body or go onward into death. At that point, I absolutely did not want to come back here into the physical body because it was just so amazing in the other realm. I had never recalled ever feeling so light before and so liberated. The fear was gone, the fear of the cancer, the pain. I had suffered for 4 years in discomfort. It was all gone. There was no reason to go back to that physical body. Not only had I been suffering, but my family had been suffering, caring for me. And I just couldn't see a single reason to go back. But it was in that moment that it seemed my Father impressed upon me that it's not your time. You need to go back. There are still some gifts for you. And I felt as though I didn't quite understand at first, because what I felt was, what is the point of going back to a sick body? But also it seemed that in the same instant, it was as though I had this vision of clarity, or like I had entered another dimension. And this other dimension or realm was like I had this feeling of incredible clarity where suddenly everything made sense. And I understood. I understood why I had the cancer. I understood how everything in my life had led me to that point in time where I was lying there dying on that hospital bed. I understood also that we are amazing, magnificent, powerful beings, because I felt my energy, my essence was so huge and powerful and amazing, powerful beyond my imagination, beyond anything I could ever have known before. And I realized that I had never known this. It was the first time that I knew this. And then I realized that now that I knew what I knew, if I go back into my body, my cancer was going to heal. And it was at that moment that my father impressed upon me, now that you know the truth, go back and live your life fearlessly. And it was at that time that I started to open my eyes and come out of the coma. And as I opened my eyes, I saw my family, I saw my husband, my mother, my brother who had just arrived. And they were all there, and they were smiling because I started to open my eyes. And at first, even though I was opening my eyes and I started talking a little bit, I could hardly talk, and I was very, very groggy. And it seems that I wasn't making any sense. I started to say things like, Dad said I was going to be okay, Dad was there. And they had no idea what I was talking about. But they were just happy that I looked like I was coming out of the coma. And then a little while later, the doctor walked into the room, and he was surprised that I was coming out of the coma, and he actually said, this is wonderful that she's coming out of the coma. And I greeted him by his name. I said, good afternoon, Dr. Chan, and I was very groggy. I said it groggily. And apparently, I had never seen this doctor before until after I'd gone into the coma. That was the first time he treated me. So he looked at me and he said, how do you know my name? And I said, aren't you the one that took the fluid out of my lungs in the middle of the night? And he said, yeah, but you were in a coma. How would you know that? And I was still very groggy. I said I was. And when he left the room, I said to my husband, why was he so surprised that I recognized him? Isn't he the one that said to you that my organs are shutting down and I won't make it through the night? And my husband said, yeah, but he didn't say that in this room. Apparently, the conversation had taken place 40 feet down the hallway and the door had been shut. And I had been aware of everything that was happening. Over the days, I started to tell them more and more. And I started to remember more and more, because the first couple of days I was really confused. But more interestingly, I said to the doctors, you can remove the oxygen tube. I don't need it anymore. And sure enough, I didn't need the oxygen. I told them they could remove the food tube. And the doctors were getting really, really surprised. Now, within 4 days, my tumors shrunk by about 70% just to the touch. And even though my body was still very weak, I wanted to sit up. I wanted to talk. It was like I was euphoric. I knew something had happened, but I still didn't understand exactly what had happened. And because I was feeling so euphoric, it was like I still couldn't walk yet, but I just felt so happy. And normally I love listening to music. I absolutely love music, all kinds of music. So I was telling my husband that I want to listen to my music. Can you bring my iPod? And so he brought my iPod into the hospital. And bear in mind, I was in the intensive care unit, separated only by curtains between the other patients. And my husband brought my iPod in, and because I still had the wires connected to me and to my heart and things in my veins, and because I had all these big Band-Aids because of the open skin lesions, I couldn't put the earphones in. So he set up these little speakers by my bedside, and I wanted to listen to Dancing Queen by ABBA over. It's such a happy song. And so I was in my bed just shaking and listening to Dancing Queen over and over. And I was laughing. And then, and my husband said, you know, and I hadn't eaten in months, and that's why my muscles had wasted away. And the doctors said, you've got to eat. And I said, yes, I'm ready to eat. And they said, what's the first thing you want? I said, chocolate ice cream. And they, surprisingly, they actually said, that's all right, you can have that because it's soothing for the throat. They just removed the food tube. And so there I was with the chocolate ice cream and listening to Dancing Queen. And finally, one of the nurses came in and she said, "The families of the other patients are complaining." They said, "You're causing a disruption in the intensive care unit." So they had to move me to a regular room. And the doctor said that these open skin lesions I had, the doctor said they would have to call in a reconstructive surgeon to actually stitch them up because they were so big, the wounds were so big, they were not going to heal on their own, particularly because I was still very malnourished. They said I didn't have the strength to heal. What subsequently happened was that the reconstructive surgeon came in and said that definitely he would need to do surgery, but I was too weak, so he would come back in 3 weeks. When he came back 3 weeks later, he said the wounds have started to heal all by themselves. I won't need surgery. Not only that, but about 9 days after my NDE, the doctors were actually waiting for me to get stronger so that they could continue to give me treatments and do tests, run tests like biopsies. So about 9 days after my NDE, they wanted to do a bone marrow biopsy. I kept telling them that you won't find any cancer. I know I'm healed. I know why I'm back now. And they said, "That's fine. It's fine you think that way, but we need to do what we need to do." And they said, "Cancer doesn't just disappear like that. We just have to find it." And they did the bone marrow biopsy and there was no trace of cancer. And they still said that, "Nope, the cancer doesn't disappear. Now we'll have to do a lymph node biopsy." And when they sent me to the radiologist office for him to mark a lymph node using the ultrasound, he was really surprised because he said he couldn't even find a lymph node big enough to suggest cancer when the scans on his light box showed that just 3 weeks previously, my entire neck was covered with tumors and enlarged lymph nodes. The oncologist, however, insisted that I still have a biopsy on any lymph node. And they confirmed that there was no trace of cancer. Finally, they did a full body PET scan. And although I was receiving treatments, they confirmed that they could cut the treatments short. And they sent me home from the hospital because it was confirmed there was no trace of cancer in my body. And finally, they sent me home after 5 weeks in the hospital because by that point, I was strong enough to walk around and take care of myself and to go out. On the day they were releasing me to go home, I was actually ecstatic. I was thinking I've been sick for so long. The first thing I wanted to do was to go shopping. And when the doctors were releasing me, the doctor actually said to me, "Oh, you must be so happy to go home." I said, "Yes, absolutely." And he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to go shopping." And he said, "No, you're absolutely not going to go shopping. You're still weak and there are people in the shops. You're going to go home and rest." And he actually wrote on my discharge slip, "Released to go home for further rest, no shopping." The interesting thing was that this was actually later picked up by another oncologist who studied my case much later when an oncologist flew to Hong Kong to study my medical records. He actually contacted me and he said, "In your medical records, your oncologist has said no shopping." And I said, "Yeah, that's right." So the reason I'm here today, as I mentioned to you, is because the biggest thing I learned is that life is really a gift. And there's a reason why I'm here, and there's a reason why every single one of you are here. And I want to convey to you the value of your life and how important it is for you to be here right now. I don't stand here before you as some enlightened guru or enlightened master, because I'm certainly no more enlightened than anyone else that sits here in this room. It's just that something happened to me that taught me a few lessons. And these are lessons I wish I knew. I wish somebody told me. And that's why I want to share them with you. And I'm a simple person, so I like to keep my lessons really, really simple. So the first lesson and the most important lesson I learned about life, or what I learned that I believe saved my life, is that I learned that it is extremely important to love yourself. Very, very important. And I cannot stress this enough. And it was the love I felt coming for me that saved my life. I never knew before that, before my near-death experience, that I was supposed to love myself unconditionally. The love I felt in the other realm, it doesn't matter where or who it was coming from, because all of us have different philosophies of how we like to see life. I don't like to put labels on anything. So whether the love comes from Jesus or Allah or Krishna or Buddha, it doesn't matter. Whether it came from my father, it's all God. The love was still unconditional. And that love that I felt told me that I was deserving and I was worthy of being loved. And it made me realize that it's okay to love myself. Most of us don't know this while growing up. While we are children, we don't realize, or even as we grow up, when we're teenagers and in our 20s, we don't realize that it's okay to love ourselves. When we're born, we know it's okay to love ourselves. When we're born, we're happy little children. Look at babies. Babies are so full of themselves and they're so joyful. And then we spend a lifetime getting it conditioned out of us. And then halfway through our life, we then start reading self-help books and going to courses to bring it back into our lives, to find it again. So what I want to tell you is that really, if you loved yourself, so many of your problems and issues in life would actually be solved and healed. Now I want to just ask you, honestly speaking, before you embarked on a journey, on a self-searching journey or whatever journey, before you started reading books on spiritual things, say when you were much younger, were you ever taught that it's important to love yourself? I want a show of hands. How many of you were actually taught that it is important to love yourself? Okay, a few of you. But literally, I think I can count maybe 5 hands. Now here's what happens when you love yourself. When you love yourself and you fill yourself up, you have a lot more to give other people, because you cannot give people what you yourself don't have. When you give and give and give, but you're empty inside, and you just keep giving because maybe for some reason you've learned that it's selfish to love yourself, it's selfish to give yourself, and it's selfless to give. You've got to be loving, you've got to keep being generous with your love and doing for other people, and you keep doing and doing and doing, and then imagine that you become drained, which is very common, which is what I did. I became drained to the point I got cancer. Now imagine you start to become drained and tired of giving, and you realize that people aren't giving back to you. And now you're feeling a little bit needy, like you need some support, but it's not coming back to you. What do you feel? You feel resentment towards the people you've been giving and giving who aren't giving back to you. And when you feel resentment for them, what happens is that it makes your love for them conditional. And that is the start of a dysfunctional relationship. And that's why we have so many relationships that are breaking down. Now, you imagine if you allow yourself to fulfill yourself. You allow yourself to love yourself enough that you allow yourself to find your joy. Now, people who love themselves, who allow themselves to find their joy and feel joyful about life, are the most fun and generous people to be around. And when you love yourself to the point where you are feeling fulfilled, self-actualized, then the love that comes from you is unconditional because you don't need anything back from anybody. The love you give is pure and unconditional. And that is the most important lesson I learned. Because let me tell you a little bit about the person I used to be. I used to believe that it was selfish to love myself. I used to believe that I had to love other people more than I loved myself. And what that meant was that I gave and gave until I became so drained. It also meant that I was a people pleaser. I didn't want anybody to dislike me. I wanted to make sure that I was pleasing everybody and doing things for everybody and anybody except me. When I had cancer, for the first time, the cancer gave me permission to do stuff for myself. It gave me permission to receive. I want to give you all permission to receive. I want you to know that it's okay to receive. Don't wait until something happens. Thank you. And this is so important for you to know. We learn from the time we're very young that we need to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. But then we don't learn to love ourselves. Maybe that's why everybody's so messed up. The other interesting thing you'll find that happens when you learn to love yourself is that you will find that other people love you more when you love yourself more. You will also find that other people respect you as much as you respect yourself. Other people value you as much as you value yourself. And the more that you love yourself, the more love you have to give, and also you'll find the more other people love you. There's really no downside, and I cannot figure out why this is such a huge secret. I just can't figure, because there's no downside. People say that it's egotistical to love yourself. No, the ones who are the most egotistical or narcissistic are the ones who don't love themselves, and they're overcompensating. It's the other way around. The people who love themselves are the most generous and joyful people to be around. And people have asked me, well, how much love for self is too much? There's no such thing as too much. Our planet suffers from too little self-love. And when we love ourselves, we stop judging ourselves so harshly. We become kinder to ourselves. And when you are kinder to yourself, you're kinder to other people. When you stop judging yourself, you stop judging other people. People who we see as very critical, judgmental, they're actually even more critical and judgmental inwardly towards themselves. What you are inside is what you express outside. So the more you love yourself inside, the more you'll show that outside. So that is really the number one key thing. The second thing that I learned, which is really important, is to live your life fearlessly. Be yourself fearlessly. It's really important to be fearless. And what do I mean by fearless? I mean that stop fearing things like what other people think of you. Most people don't really care. I used to worry so much about what people thought of me. I was, as I said, a people pleaser. So I feared everything. I feared what people thought of me. I feared not being good enough. I feared failing. I used to treat myself like a doormat. I would put myself last. I would always put other people ahead of me. When I would do things for people, I didn't do it from a place of love because I didn't do it because I wanted to do it for them. I did it because I feared what they would think of me if I didn't do it. So every choice, every decision I made came from a place of fear, not from a place of love. The same with the kind of foods I chose to eat. If I chose to eat healthy food, I didn't choose it because I valued my life and wanted to be healthy and live long. I did it because I feared illness. I took supplements and I was obsessive about them because I feared illness. I feared everything. I was obsessive about things. I had a lot of obsessive compulsive behaviors, all of which disappeared with the coma and the near-death experience. So I lived a life where every decision was made from fear. People tell me that some fears are good because fear keeps you safe. But I disagree, because fear actually immobilizes you. Love keeps you safe. If you love yourself, you'll never put yourself in danger. You won't put other people in danger. When you love yourself, when you love your life, you value your life, you will keep yourself safe. The other really important thing I learned, which I talked about a little bit, is that life is a gift. Most of us don't realize that, and as I said, it's a shame that we don't learn things or we don't realize things until it's taken away from us. We don't realize the value of things until it's taken away. The thing about life, what I learned, is that everything about life is a gift, even the challenges. We're here to experience life, so we're here to even experience the challenges. When I had cancer, I never would have thought that was a gift. I suffered a lot, terribly, and if anybody told me that was a gift, I would have thought it was absolute nonsense because I was suffering so much. But today, I know that was the biggest gift that life could ever have given me, because I wouldn't be standing here today in beautiful Sedona, Arizona, if that hadn't happened to me. Everything in life is a gift in the end. And if it doesn't feel like a gift right now, it means you haven't reached the end yet. You know, the thing is, I want to use another metaphor to describe what the planet feels like. All these little things. I mean, the self-love thing, it's like the simplest thing. Why is it that nobody is taught that from a young age? Coming out of an NDE, it feels like the world, our rules, our laws and everything have been created by blind people for blind people. And if I give you a metaphor, I like to use metaphors because sometimes there aren't words in the English language to describe what happened, what I experienced in the other realm. But I want you to pretend, play along with me. Imagine that you were born blind and you've never seen, you've never had sight ever before in your life. So you were born blind. Now, imagine if someone's talking to you about colors, red and blue. You've never seen colors. So there's no way you even know what they're talking about. So now imagine if someone gives you a red cup in your hand and a blue cup in the other hand. You can't see them. And this person is telling you one cup is red, one cup is blue. So you've got these cups in your hand and they're identical in every other way. And so you're feeling these cups and you are feeling them all over, you're licking it, you're biting it, and then you're doing it to the other one, and you're saying, nope, there's no difference, they're identical. And this person is saying, no, there's another property which you're not aware of, but they're different. And you're saying, nope, I don't believe you, they're identical. This is what it sometimes feels like, coming back from an experience like this and trying to integrate it. And there are things that you just want people to know, but sometimes there just aren't the words. Now I want you to take this game a little bit further and imagine if you live in like a home or a country or a society where every single person in that country is blind and has been born blind and they've never had sight before. Now think about it. If you are blind and you've been born blind, you have no concept of shades, light and dark. You have no concept of spatial awareness. Right now, you can look across the room and you can measure distance just by sight. You know that it'll take you 30 seconds to walk across the room just by looking at it. But if you were blind, there's no way you would know that. You would have to physically walk it and feel your path. Also, if you're blind, you can't stand there and find the shortest path between 2 points. You have to try every path and then physically measure the time. Now imagine if you can see for a day, just one day, and you, one person, can see, and your eyes open, and suddenly you can see everything, and there's this clarity, this incredible clarity, and everything makes sense. And you know why every time you walk that way, your leg bumps into something, but when you walk that way, it doesn't. And you know by seeing that all you have to do is go and move that thing out of the way. When you can see, you can actually figure out the shortest distance between 2 points. And you now know that for me to get from the bedroom to the kitchen, there's a shorter way than what I've been doing. So then even if you go back to being blind again, nobody and nothing can take away that sight that you briefly had that gave you that clarity and understanding. And that's exactly what it feels like, having that glimpse, that clarity of life. And so now imagine that even if you've gone back to being blind again, you know the shortcuts. You know that if I walk from here to there, it's much shorter than going the long way. And so you want to tell people or show them. And you are aware that the environment that you were living in, that you are living in, has been co-created by everybody around you who has always been blind, who has never had sight. That's the situation. What I also want to do is share a little bit with you about illness. If somebody, how many of you are facing a physical challenge right now? Okay, quite a few of you. And how many of you have loved ones or know people who are facing a challenge? Wow, just about everyone. One thing that I would want everybody, anybody who's facing an illness to know, and those of you who have friends or are caring for people with illness, I'd like you to pass this on to them. I would like you to know that whatever illness you're diagnosed with, you are not your illness. You still deserve to live your life in joy. What we tend to do is the minute we get a diagnosis is that we become obsessed and focused on the illness. And we make our lives about trying to cure or heal the illness. Our entire life focus becomes about the illness. If that's what you are doing right now, I want you to stop, absolutely stop. It doesn't mean you stop whatever treatments you're doing. continue with whatever treatments you're doing and do what resonates with you. But in terms of actually focusing your days, I'd like you to try this. When you wake up in the morning, I want you to pretend that you have, at this moment, been presented with a complete clean bill of health. Like just completely clean bill of health. Your doctor has given you a clean bill of health and you are feeling amazing. Just get into that feeling. Now, what would you do to celebrate? What would you do if right at this moment you were told that you were 100% healthy? Now I want you to go and do it. Whatever it is, I want you to go and do it. In other words, continue to celebrate life, even if you're facing an illness. Make your life about celebration regardless of what you're going through. That is really important. Many of you have lost people that you loved, that you do love, you still love, and they've crossed over and they're in the other realm. What your loved ones would want you to know is that they are happy and they are fine. And your loved ones want you to know that they're still with you and they love you. But the most important thing that your loved ones want you to know is that they want you to be happy again. They want you to find your happiness and your joy again. If there's one message that your loved ones want you to know, is that they don't want you to feel guilty if you find happiness again. No matter what circumstances you've lost your loved ones under, whether it's through illness, accident, sudden death, gradual death, whether it's through suicide, don't feel guilty about anything. Nobody goes before their time. You could not control their death. If there's anything unsaid that you need to say to them, say it. They can hear you. They really can. And many people are confused about how to mourn people's deaths. Do whatever you need to do for your healing. You don't need to do it for them. They really don't need it. Do it for yourself. Do it for your healing. And if you find happiness again, you really need to realize that your life is still a gift and to be lived in joy. Even though they're gone, don't stop living your life. So if you find happiness again, don't feel guilty. Even if you've lost a partner and you find someone else to love again, don't feel guilty. They are very happy for you. Nothing makes them happier than to see you happy. And no matter what their personality was when they were in physical life, remember, they are without all the filters and the layers in the other realm. All they are and all they feel for you is unconditional love. And just remember that always. I was mentioning earlier also about if you had an illness or if you know a loved one that has an illness. The other thing I want to mention is that sometimes we can get very confused with types of treatments, diagnosis, and so on. In many ways, for many instances, I would actually ask you to trust your heart. Ask your heart what feels better. Go with the healing modality that feels better because you need to feel that you are being healed. If you are working with a doctor and the doctor has said something to you that's maybe confusing or given you many different treatment options and you feel confused, doctors actually are doing their best. The medical system is not the most perfect system, but when people go into the medical system, doctors as well as nurses, their intention is to heal people. They're good people, but sometimes they're stuck in a system which doesn't always work in our favor. And very often, even doctors are stuck diagnosing out of fear and not out of love. So if you want to move your doctor from a place of fear to a place of love, ask your doctor what they would suggest if this diagnosis was for somebody they loved, for a member of their own family. If a member of their own family had this diagnosis, what would they suggest? I'd also like to tell you a little bit about what I think we need to teach our children. Because as we saw here, 95% of the room did not know that actually the biggest secret to a good life, a happy life, is loving yourself unconditionally first. And that is such a well-kept secret. And this is something that I would love for all children coming into this world to know. So if you have children, if you have grandchildren, they need to know this. Even if they are being punished, even if they're being reprimanded for their behavior, that's okay. Kids need to be reprimanded, punished, whatever. But they still need to know that regardless of their behavior, that you will never stop loving them. That they will always be loved unconditionally. Children also need to know that it's perfectly okay to be different, to be unique. In fact, it's favorable to be different. And on a bigger scale, which I think will take a lot longer to change, I wish our education system taught kids to collaborate instead of competing. Thank you. Because I believe competition is at the root of a lot of the huge problems we face in the world today. Because from the time kids are very young, they're taught to compete against all the other kids to get to the top of the class in order to get to the best schools and the best jobs. So right from day one, we see everybody else as our enemy, somebody who we have to beat out to get what we want. Whereas if we all realize that all we have to do is be ourselves and collaborate together, we would have a very, very different world. Thank you. The most important thing that happens when you love yourself is that you allow yourself to be who you are. And many people ask me, what is my purpose? What is your purpose? Many people ask me, how do I find my purpose in life? I have a very simple solution. As I told you, I'm a simple person. And so I like very simple solutions. Your only purpose is to be yourself. That's all. And all you have to do is be as you can be, shine your light as brightly as you can, and your purpose will unfold before you. Just allow life to unfold before you. And it's that simple. And it's much more important to be yourself than it is to even be positive. Because many of us believe, and this is true, many of us believe that we need to be positive. When you allow yourself to be yourself, you won't even have to worry about being positive. We only worry about constantly thinking that, oh, I need to be positive, I need to be positive, because we're constantly thinking about who and what we need to be. But once you allow yourself to be yourself, even if you have fleeting moments of feeling bad, negative, whatever, they pass. Allow them and they pass. The more you suppress these feelings because you judge them as negative, the more that they will actually surprise you and come out when you least expect it. So allow yourself to be who you are, shine your light as brightly as you can, and go out and live your life fearlessly. Thank you. Thank you very much.
way this will work is if you have a question, just go ahead and stand up and ask a question, and then Anita's going to repeat it for the folks that are going to be watching this later on YouTube so everyone can hear it. So does anyone have a question? Yes, sir.
I'm always asked this question by my wife.
I like it already.
You get into a moment to where all of a sudden you lose it, and you get angry, and you get the feeling like you want to run away or whatever. What one thing do you do to win it back?
Okay.
If you get angry.
I do. So the question is, if you get a moment when you feel angry or you lose it, how do you get it back? Now, in the past, I'm going to tell you both what I used to do in the past and what I do now. So in the past, I would have judged myself, and I would not have allowed myself to feel the anger. I would have denied it. I would have pushed it back down, suppressed it. What I do today is I acknowledge it, embrace it, and say it's part of being human, and then I just surrender, and I do a lot of surrendering to the universe. But first is acknowledging, embracing, and saying, it's okay, I'm human, these are human emotions, and then surrender it, and it passes very quickly. Thank you.
Well, I assume you talked about seeing your father on the other side.
Yes.
What about, will you see friends? What about pets? I mean, do you see pets on the other side? I don't want to go anywhere where they're not.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Yes, you do. The question is, do we see pets on the other side? Yes, we do reunite with our pets as well. We absolutely do. I lost my dog 2 years ago, but I just wanted to tell you real quickly how beautiful pets are, because they're very much a part of us, and they're part of the same consciousness that we are. They share the same essence, and they're more in tune than we are. And my dog was really sick for about 6 months, but he was aging. He was 14 years old, and I wasn't ready to let him go. And I felt that he was hanging on for me. But one day, I actually said to him, because I could see he was suffering, and I said to him, it's okay. You can go if you have to. And that night, I went out. He waited till I went out, and that was when he passed. Somebody else was taking care of him. And I wouldn't have gone out, but he passed, but I had to go out. And so he passed while I was out. And of course, I was very, very upset. But what happened is that within weeks after he passed away was when I got an email from Hay House saying that Wayne Dyer had discovered my story, and that they wanted to publish my book, and they wanted to fly me over to the US. And so this whole new life just took off. If my dog was still alive, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing today. It was as though he left at the exact perfect time, like he knew this was his time to go. And either he opened the door for me, or he knew that this was the time he had to go. So yeah, he's there waiting. Thank you for your question. Yeah.
Did you see him?
Oh no, he just left 2 years ago. My NDE was 7 years ago.
I thought maybe you might have seen him in the other realm.
No. Oh, the question was, did I see him? But I didn't, because I wasn't. He just passed away 2 years ago. But I still feel his presence. Yes. Okay.
Do you have any thoughts as to why it is we're born blind?
Okay, the question is, do I have any thoughts as to why it is we're born blind? So you're speaking metaphorically, all of us, right? Truthfully, I don't think we're born blind. I think we get it conditioned out of us. I think we are born with everything we need to navigate life. I think there is something very wrong with our education system, and it is my hope that someday people that are influential enough can actually make some changes. And when I gave you the metaphor about the world being designed by the blind leading the blind, I was referring to big institutions like education systems, medical systems, government systems. It's not the people. I don't want anybody to feel it's their fault. Some of you might even be here who work in these systems. These systems were set up long before you and I were born, and we just become part of the system. But I don't think we're born that way. Thanks.
If you have a question, let me have you guys stand up so she can see who has questions.
Okay. Maybe, yes, we can go through you one at a time. Yes.
Was your essence separate, or did you feel integrated to something universally larger?
The question is, was my essence separate, or did I feel integrated to something universally larger? I was integrated to something universally larger. We are all connected. We're all part of it. We're all one. But I still retained my identity. And I'll tell you again, the best way that I can explain it is that if you think of your hand, and imagine if there's something here covering your palm, and all you can see are your fingers. And imagine if these fingers are people, humans, and these humans are separate. They're 5 separate humans, and they're fighting each other, and they're arguing. And then when they die, they realize that, oh, we're all part of one hand. That's kind of what it feels like. Yes.
Do you have any explanation for why so many people choose to leave when there's no one in the room?
The question is, do I have any explanation why so many people choose to leave when there's no one in the room? My own feeling about that is because the loved ones in the room are keeping them there, but they are ready to go. And so when their loved ones leave the room, it gives them the opportunity to cross over. It means that they are ready and have been ready, but haven't left because their loved ones are in the room and keeping them there. Yes, you.
Not to digress, really, but for those that are ill, for those that take care of them that are ill, for those that choose, for instance, hospice, or that we might choose it for them, like to euthanize a dog that is in extreme pain or bad health. How is that viewed in love?
If you do it from a place of love, then it's perfectly fine. You don't need to.
Because it seems so selfish.
To euthanize? Yeah. Personally, okay, this is something that is still a controversial. So what I'm just going to give you my personal views is I personally wouldn't euthanize. Like even when my dog was suffering for 6 months, I had friends telling me that it would be more humane to put him down. I couldn't do that. And my reason was because what if somebody did that to me? And I was dying, I was in a coma, but I still came out of it. So I always hold out the hope that they might come out. But that's just me. And there might be people who leave instructions that they want to die, that they don't want to suffer. So I think that I would not actually say that. What I would do is I would remove the moral dilemma from that. This is what I would ask you to do. Because many of us misunderstand and put moral values on things, but what I would do is ask you to take it as a personal or a decision between you and your loved ones and whoever it is that it's involved. I tend not to look at these things as moral dilemmas. I tend to look at them as personal dilemmas. So there's no moral judgment whichever way you go. That's what I'm trying to say. I hope that helps.
It did.
Thank you. Yes.
Anita, for most of us, you talk about the layering process of fear just getting layered on us through our lives as we go through our lives. And for you, it happened very abruptly. That you were engulfed in this complete love, came back fearless.
Yes.
How would you suggest for the most of us that don't have that kind of experience to process through getting back to our essence and letting go of that fear? It sounds wonderful, but I understand it's a process and it's...
Yes.
I want it to happen now.
It is a little bit of a process, but it's a journey. The first thing is to acknowledge that you do live your life from a fear-based place. And it's so subtle that many people don't even realize. I didn't realize I was doing it. And fear is something that sometimes we don't even realize we're living a fear-based life until the fear is gone. And then we kind of realize, oh wow, that silence is amazing. So there's many things you can do for yourself. One thing is, I tell people, don't work at getting rid of your fears, because all you'll be doing is focusing on the fear. Whenever you try to get rid of something, you just end up focusing on it. And I would say work on loving yourself. There's no room for fear and love together. They cannot exist together. It's one or the other. The more you love yourself, the less fear you have in your life. So what I would ask you to do is not get rid of your fears, but transcend your fears by loving yourself more. So change the focus to how do I love myself? Yes.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story with the world and also for being here tonight. I'm curious about the 5 weeks after your near-death experience and your release from the hospital and your amazing transformation into wellness. What was actually going on in your body? What kind of sensations did you have as you went through that amazing transformation and that healing process that made you say, yes, it's actually happening?
Well,
what was going on with you physically and emotionally and spiritually?
The question is, what was going on with me mentally, physically, spiritually for the 5 weeks during that healing, between the time of the NDE and the time I got released from hospital, right? Yeah. It wasn't always physically pleasant, because once I came back, I was euphoric in the beginning, but I did start to feel a lot of pain again, because I still had I was still having medications and things, and I was having biopsies. The biopsies were really, really awful and uncomfortable. The worst was the lymph node biopsy, but even the bone marrow biopsy, where they insert a needle through your spine, all of this was incredibly uncomfortable. So the reality of being back in a physical body and feeling pain again, that was actually not very comfortable. But what kept me going was that knowing. And I would describe it not as a belief, not as a wish or a hope or a dream. It was a knowing. It was as though I knew, every part of me knew I was well, but I now just had to wait for my body to catch up. Yes.
As a teacher, I would lose my job if I taught what you just taught us. And I don't know if you realize that's how deep it is in the school system. And when you do teach them to love themselves, you walk a fine line. And there's many teachers ready to teach this. You just get to have a place now to teach it, because it's not in the school anymore.
Exactly.
So I agree on that one. So my question for you is, where do we go? Because there is, to gather these youth, to gather these children, is the most important thing that we get to do for them.
That's a great question. The question, for those who couldn't hear, is that this beautiful lady is a teacher, and she says that if they taught the children some of the things that I talked about, they could lose their job. Now, what I want to ask you is that, do you feel it's important that the children need to know this?
I taught them this.
Excellent. Good for you. Good for you. Thank you. So, what?
You could see it in them that they didn't, at 12 and 13, they carried burdens of regrets that were unbelievable. And they didn't like themselves. And to have them give themselves a compliment was like pulling teeth.
It's sad, isn't it? In fact, when you ask what we can do or where do we go from here, the sad thing is that, exactly as I was saying, that most of us are part of a system, and we need to be part of the system because we have bills to pay and so on. And that's unfortunately what life is like. This is why, and I know some of you, a lot of you are not in a position yet to do anything about it, but what I would ask is, in this case with the children, is the people who are parents, you have the ability to teach that to your children. And when the parents start doing it, it will start to become easier for the teachers to do it. The other thing is, for parents and teachers, it's important for you to love yourself, because you bring yourself into the children's lives. And the children will learn through osmosis by picking it up from you. So learn self-care and self-love for yourself when you go in to teach the children.
Hi.
Hi.
On the before and after the NDE, did you find any difference in those that have passed on that you have met again, and now that you have returned from your NDE? And is there any more of a closer communication in their essence? And an example, case in point, like say with your father, you say, geez, Dad, I lost my keys again, can you help me out?
So if I understand you correctly, your question is that since after my NDE, do I have more communication with the people who have passed on? More closer communication now than I did before? Is that, yes? Yes, I do. and exactly that kind of thing. I talk to my best friend a lot. I talk to my father. I even now talk to my dog who's passed on. So yeah, I talk to them as if they're there. And they are, exactly. Thank you, yes, they are. And since my NDE, I'm also aware of a feeling that I'm guided. And I was always guided, but I wasn't aware of it. And when we're not aware of it, we don't always listen to it. We don't open ourselves up to it. But now I'm very aware that I'm guided. So I allow the guidance and I surrender to it. And sometimes people interpret surrendering as a weakness, but it isn't. It's actually a strength. Giving your power away is a weakness. It means that you allow other people to make your decisions for you. You give your power to other people. But surrendering means you're surrendering to a higher power, the universal energy. It means allowing universe to work through you. And what ends up happening is that when universe is allowed to work through you, the results are actually far greater than anything you could have accomplished if you tried to figure it out and control it yourself. Yes.
Yeah. Hi. Did you find that your relationships with your friends and family changed greatly after your NDE and the awareness of self-love in your own self?
Yes, it changed quite drastically. Thankfully, my husband and I have always been very close, like right through. My husband, in fact, he's just the most amazing person ever. He saw me right through, and I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him. If he, at any point, if he had left through that ordeal, I don't think I would have come back. But he was just the most amazing. And I went through a phase even after coming out of my NDE and healing where I felt the only person on the planet that understands me is my husband, because we went through it together. And I did feel as though I lost a lot of friends, and I felt that nobody understood me now, because I felt very, very different about life, about everything, about working, about money, about everything. Yeah, so very, very different. So it was difficult to hold on to friends and relationships. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how's people in Hong Kong receive you? I'm from Hong Kong.
Oh, hi.
I tell my family, nobody knows about you. So what do you explain, like the East and the West, how they receive you differently?
The people in Hong Kong who know of me receive me very well, but the thing is that with my book has only been published in English so far, and the Chinese publication is being launched in May, and I suspect after May more people will start to hear me. Right now, more of the expatriates, the foreigners in Hong Kong, have read my book, because actually in English books my book hit #2 in Hong Kong, but 95 or 97% of the population in Hong Kong is Chinese, so many of them still haven't heard of it. So I'm really looking forward to the book coming out in Chinese in May.
How about in India?
Oh, in India it's doing really well. My book's been out for about 10 months in India, so it's doing really well. And yeah, it's actually been quite incredible in India, because I get a really warm reception there. Thanks for asking that. Yes?
You say you communicate with those on the other side. Do they communicate back?
Yes, I believe they do. I mean, I feel they guide me all the time. All the time.
The reason I ask that, it sounds kind of funny, but I lost my mate, my really close mate, and I talk to him a lot, but I never get answers. I'm not getting answers, and many people say to me, do you communicate with your love? And I do. And they say, well, do you hear back? And I don't. So I'm wondering, do you really know when they are communicating back? How do you know that?
Well,
do they actually talk? No. So how do you really know that you have reached your love from the other side?
Let me repeat the question for those who couldn't hear. She asked about, what's your name, sorry?
It's Priscilla.
Priscilla asked whether we hear back from our loved ones when we communicate with them. And because she communicates with her partner, and she feels that she doesn't hear back from him. So it doesn't come necessarily as a voice, but it can be through signals, it can be through incidences and things that happen. I can give you many, many different examples in different ways. Like, in fact, I'll tell you something that happened to me last night, which was really interesting, was that I was speaking in Phoenix, Arizona, and it was a big venue, and there was about more than 500 people, 500 or 600 people in the audience. And after I finished speaking, and I was signing books, the queue for the book signing was really long. And I didn't realize, I mean, there were some people that couldn't wait in the queue and had to leave for some reason or other, and it was getting late. So after I finished the book signing, it was after 10 o'clock, my hosts then drove us to look for a restaurant that was opened to find something to eat. The first choice of restaurant we went to was shut. The second choice of restaurant we went to was shut. The third choice was shut. By then they were tired of driving around, so we walked into a random restaurant that was near the third one that just happened to be open. When we walked in the restaurant, there was a gentleman sitting at a table who looked up at me as though he was expecting me, and he stood up and he said, "I knew you were coming here, and that's why I'm here. I've been waiting for you." And I'm not kidding. And I looked at him and I said, what? Because I didn't know him. I'd never met him before. And he held up a book, my book. And he said, I was just at your speech. And the line was too long. And I couldn't wait in the line. So I came, but I knew you were going to come to this restaurant. And so I came here to wait for you. And I said to him, how did you know? You've got to be kidding me. And he said, I'm really not kidding. I said, but this was not even our first choice of restaurant. It was random. And he said, my wife passed away 3 months ago, and I really wanted your signature on the book. But I was meeting someone, I had to leave. I couldn't stand in line for an hour. And so I was guided to come to the restaurant where I knew you would be. Go figure.
So this is really a test for everyone here to see how well you communicate with your relatives. Where's Anita going to be tonight? Do we have time for one more question?
Let's see, who's been standing the longest? Here? Okay, there you go.
You spoke about, when you went and had the near-death experience, understanding that everything your father did was out of unconditional love for you. And I was wondering if you could speak about both self-forgiveness and forgiveness, of your parents or of difficult life experiences that you haven't been able to process.
Okay. The question was about forgiveness and how we could, so you'd like to know about, would you like me to just speak a little bit about forgiveness, self-forgiveness, forgiveness of other people? I actually believe that we can go beyond forgiveness. When we really start to realize that people are doing the best they can with what they know in that moment, regardless of what they've done, it's beyond forgiveness. It's more like empathy, compassion. It's trying to understand where they're coming from. And that goes not just with what other people do, but with yourself. And when you can do it for yourself, it starts to become easier to do it for other people. So start by being more empathic towards yourself. Whenever you do something that you feel you're judging yourself. I mean, how many times do you say things like, oh man, that was so stupid of me. How could I have done that? Or I should have done that differently. It's things like that. Watch that self-talk and tell yourself, no, I'm a beautiful child of the universe. I don't deserve to be talked to like that. And start to empathize with yourself. And when you can do that for yourself, you'll start to do that for other people. And you'll realize there's nothing to forgive. And I also want to add that in the other realm, there's no judgment because there's nothing to judge. We are all love. We're all pure love. Unconditional love. So there's nothing to judge. And one of the most controversial things in my book, which many people ask me about, is about the fact that I say that there's no judgment, there's no hell, there's no punishment. When you realize that there's nothing to forgive, then there's nothing to punish either. People who commit acts that take them to prison while we're in physical life, yes, we have prisons here to protect us from people who live in so much fear that they can't be trusted not to cause harm. But when they cross over, they themselves understand in that moment of clarity, they themselves understand that everything they did out of fear. They did because they didn't know any better. Now, if you imagine, if you have a child who you have been punishing because they have been not just reckless, but destructive and harmful to other people, harmful to their siblings. So you have had to reprimand them, punish them, scold them. Now imagine if one day, when the child comes to you and says, oh my God, I've had an awakening. I understand why I did those things and how stupid it was of me. Are you going to burn them in hell for all of eternity? Of course not. And this is what it's like when we cross over. It's clarity. It's understanding. We understand how our fears make us do what we do. And we can start to understand while we're here so that we don't feel those fears and we don't need to be destructive. Okay.
There's one more in there, okay?
I have to ask. There is a whole line of thought in the New Age that we are the cause of our sickness. We are bringing it on us because of how we think and what we do in life. Then there is the law of karma, that it's the payback time. And then there is the idea that we are going through it like you did to become the teacher to all of the others, to show the way. So from you have been gone there, from that altitude, what is your perspective on it? Any clarity on this?
Wait, I just want to make sure I understand the question clearly.
Okay.
So,
are we creating our cancer because we are resentful of the life we live? Are we creating the cancer because it's in our life path? We came with the karma to have the cancer and interact with different people in different ways. Or our soul chooses to come and have the cancer because coming out of it like you did, we start showing others that there is a way to love ourselves and everything we learned from you tonight.
So the question is that are we creating the cancer ourselves? Are we bringing it on ourselves? Or is it something we have decided before we come? And the third option was, sorry, I need to repeat the question for the purpose of the, and it was, is it part of karma? Now my view on this is that there are many, many possibilities and many reasons, and my views on karma has changed quite dramatically. I grew up believing in karma as being cause and effect, being punished for something I had done wrong. I now realize, in fact, I'm not dogmatic about these things anymore. It's a lot more fluid than we think it is. I think of karma in terms of like no different than yin and yang. If you pull something too far this way, it's going to swing back that way equally. So it's not like a punishment for something you've done wrong. You don't actually need to spend your life collecting karma points to create good karma in your next life. To make it really simple, all you have to do is follow your heart and follow your joy and make life more fun. So I don't think in terms of the afterlife, but at the same time, I believe that to a certain extent, we have chosen certain things before coming here. And I don't believe that any of us are coming here for the purpose of suffering. That's the other thing. We haven't come here for the purpose of suffering. We don't exactly create our cancer. It's kind of a result of certain things that happen as a result of forgetting who we are, forgetting that life is supposed to be joyful, forgetting that life is a gift. I believe that actually life could be so much simpler, less dogmatic, if we let go and if we just allow ourselves to loosen up, have fun, learn to laugh every day, and if all else fails, eat chocolate. Thank you.